What's up, guys? Welcome on into Pickswise Playbook presented by Superbook Sports. It is week 2 edition. Lauren Jbara here with Jared Smith and Tank Williams and a brand new fresh face here on the Pickswise airwaves. Tank, how are you? Welcome on into the show.
Oh, feeling good, feeling great, feeling great, feeling good. How are you? Good to be on here talking ball with
Oh,
y'all.
I
Geno
love that.
Smith
Yeah,
Feeling
over
good,
there
okay.
feeling
rapping right
good.
out of the gate. Look at
Feeling good,
this.
feeling
The
great.
bars.
That's going to be my new life motto, honestly, heading now into the days to come. But first of all, people who don't know Tank, first of all, what are you doing because you don't know who Tank is? He is Tank Williams. He played college at Stanford, first team All Pac 10 in 2001, and then had a wonderful NFL career. Played for the Titans from 2002 to 2005, the Vikings from '06 to '07, and then the Pats from '08 to '09. 283 career tackles, 3.5 sacks and 5 interceptions. And Tank, I know I was asking you before the show, but I want to ask so the world can hear too. When you catch an interception, what does that feel like? And which of your 5 interceptions do you remember the most? Like that was the most memorable
Oh,
to you that you really take with you throughout the years?
yeah, like I told you, whenever you catch an interception, it's catching money. So they always feel good, but some feel a little bit better than others. But actually, my favorite one, my most memorable one, I picked off Brett Favre. Everybody that played in the league probably picked off Brett Favre, but I did mine on Monday Night Football. Actually, getting on the Madden horse trailer. So that shows you how old I am that I actually got on the Madden
Oh yeah,
horse
I
trailer because
remember
Madden
that.
was like announcing still at that time. So yeah, that was a pretty good game for me, a pretty big moment in my career. And I also have to add that I was also first team All America in college too. You know, the first team Pac-12 sounds
Love
good, but
that.
All
Big
America
deal.
always has a nice little bling to it, you
No,
know.
you
Yes,
crush it all.
I'm sorry that I missed that. Jeez, I know. Jared is the first team All American here at Pickswise. We have Tank, first team All American in college football. And then me, I'm just trying to keep up with both of you guys at this point. So let's hit it. Let's get into it, guys. Week 1 takeaways. It
Yeah.
was a crazy first week of NFL football. The 49ers lose, the Bengals lose, the Titans lose. The Seahawks, at this point, the only undefeated team in the NFC West. And for me, the biggest takeaway kickers, man. You have one job, and a lot of missed field goals this weekend led to losses with a lot of these teams. But Jared, I'm going to start out with you first. Your biggest takeaway from all of these games here in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs are still really good, but that's not as much of a surprise as the 49ers being really bad. And I think that we'll get into San Francisco a little later and, where the market has moved or really hasn't moved that much against them, despite what was just a dismal performance in basically a biblical flood in Chicago. And I think the conditions certainly had a factor in their performance. But I was surprised really the most with San Francisco's defense, specifically their defensive line, not getting a lot of pressure and not really getting to Justin Fields, despite the fact that the Bears, by all accounts, by all the nerd metrics I look at, have one of the worst offensive lines in football. So that was the biggest surprise to me. And again, the conditions, I think, were an impact there. And they'll hopefully, if it doesn't rain in San Francisco this week or Santa Clara, we'll have a much
Mm-hmm.
better time of it. But I was a little bit surprised at how little push the San Francisco D line got on the Bears offensive line.
It's going to be interesting to see how the 49ers bounce back this week, if they do bounce back at all. Tank, how about you? Week 1, all the teams playing. What was your biggest standout as maybe a surprise that you weren't expecting after week 1 finished?
Well, the one thing for me is that at least the San Francisco 49ers can blame the weather. Like the Arizona Cardinals, we understand how good the Kansas City Chiefs are, but for Patrick Mahomes to roll into your stadium and say, what did the five fingers say to the face, and then give you a touchdown for each finger, that is cool to me. I mean, you have Kyler Murray that has a clause in his contract that talks about how much you're going to study, and then you go out and you lay out that kind of performance in week 1. Now everybody and their mama gonna be saying like, this dude definitely doesn't study his playbook because the Chiefs came in and mollywopped him. But it wasn't only the offense. The defense didn't have an idea of what they were doing on the field. I don't know why in the world you want to blitz Patrick Mahomes, even if he doesn't have Tyreek. If you give him an opportunity to blitz him in man-to-man coverage, he's going to eat you alive. So on all phases of the game, man, the Arizona Cardinals was just embarrassing, and I really don't know how they're going to follow it up against the Raiders, but they better do something.
And I know heading into the season, Cliff Kingsbury is really in the hot seat. Is he even in a hotter seat now? Is that seat like scalding hot at this point, Tank?
I mean, he's sitting pretty actually. I mean, I feel like you kind of put someone's feet to the fire before you pay them. But now Cliff has already gotten
Mm.
broken off. Kylo got
Yep.
broke off. Like these cats right now, I mean, where's the motivation? Now, whenever you step between the white lines, you want to win the game and you want to win the Super Bowl. But that like motivation of like trying to win something in order to get something, which is like to get them duckies, like that's no longer there. So I'm interested to see how they're going to try to pull this team together because what we saw in week one, like, man, they need to find something. They need to find a shining light somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, week 2 hopefully is going to bring them a little bit more success. We'll see what happens with the Cardinals. Some stats from week 1. Straight up, the favorites were 10-5-1. Over-unders, the totals went 5-11. And against the spread, the games went 8-8. So something to keep an eye on heading into week 2. Speaking of week 2, guys, let's dig right into it. Let's start out with a bang with the Bucs laying 2.5 points against the Saints. The Saints at this point sitting at the top of the NFC South after week 1, alongside none other than the team that they're going head-to-head against, and both teams looking to cement their place among the top of the division after this game. Jared, what are your expectations here, and are you betting this game at all?
So this game is on the radar for the teaser spot. It meets the criteria. It's in that kind of 2-3 range. We can get the Saints up to over a touchdown. The total is relatively low in the mid 40s, I would say. There are some better teaser spots on the board this week, which we'll get to later. But I can't fault anyone for wanting to tease the Saints this week because, let's be honest, Tom Brady has not performed well against New Orleans during his time with Tampa Bay. 2-6 ATS overall, but both of those covers were as a member of the Patriots. He is 0-4 against the spread against the Saints as a member of the Bucs. And in those 4 games, 117-53 is the scoring margin. I mean, let's be honest, the Bucs were favored in 3 of those games. One of them, they were favored by double digits, and that was that 9-zip, just ugly loss last year on Sunday Night Football. So if you want to, I know Tom Brady's like Superman. He's, 45 years old playing a game that some 35-year-olds can't really compete in. But if you want to say there is a kryptonite to Tom Brady, it is the New Orleans Saints. I think the matchups are fascinating. The Chris Godwin injury scares me a little bit. If you dig deep into what the Saints did against the Falcons last week, they ran the ball very effectively. And that is something you can't always do against this Bucs defense. So I'm curious how that dynamic looks. And on the other side, again, I do think the Bucs have some offensive issues. The offensive line is banged up. We know Godwin's a little bit hurt. And the first game, now they've only had a few days off where they've had the entire summer off to rest. Is Julio Jones going to bounce back? We know he's had nicks and cuts and injuries, soft tissue injuries over the years that has really, kept him from performing at that high level. So we're at that point now with Tampa Bay where we saw it. It looked good on Sunday night against the bad Cowboys team, but I do have some questions. The matchup scares me. And oh, by the way, this game will be in New Orleans where Tom hasn't really played that well over the years, minus, of course, that playoff game last season.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The Bucs have quite a few O-line injuries right now. Brady was sacked twice against the Cowboys last weekend, but they did a really good job racking up sacks too. They were consistently in the backfield. Tank, is that what they need to do to be able to win this game? Make Jameis uncomfortable in the pocket at this point?
Yeah, I think they need to make Jameis uncomfortable. I guess you can say I'm kind of surprised that the Bucks are favored in this game, but actually not because they are one of the better teams in the NFC and obviously the NFC South. But this is a tough matchup for them always, and even when they're healthy. But now you look at it where this Saints defense gets to go against the Buccaneers offense. They normally take away Mike Evans with Marshawn Lattimore, so usually Chris Godwin eats. So Chris Godwin is banged up now. You're really not going to put Julio in the slot. So it's going to be up to Russell Gage to try to fill that role and make some big plays for him. So I'm kind of looking at that perspective as far as the Saints defense matching up against the Bucs offense. And on the flip side, Jameis needs to protect the ball. But other than that, people have been kind of sleeping on the Saints a little bit. But this may be one of the more talented offenses that we've seen in the Saints for a while. They don't have the offensive line that they normally do. But Michael Thomas looks like Michael Thomas on the outside. Now you have Jarvis Landry roaming around in the slot, and you have Chris Olave, who is a dog that can take the top off the defense and make plays all over the field. And let's not forget that you have Alvin Kamara, and then they also have a Swiss Army knife like Taysom Hill may be a cheat code in that offense too. So you had all these weapons in place. Like, who are you really going to take away? So as long as Jameis protects the ball and the offensive line helps him a little bit, like this game could be sneaky good for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, the Saints have the Bucs number at this point. Tampa Bay is only 1-7 straight up in its last 8 games against New Orleans. Another game where one team has the other's number is the Colts taking on the Jags, because the Colts may or may not still have a little chip on their shoulder coming off of Week 18 last season. At this point, the Colts laying 4 points against them. And the 2022 season didn't necessarily start out how Indy wanted it to. They had a winnable game in Week 1 against the Texans. They made a ton of mistakes. That game ended at a tie. Can you see them bouncing back here, Tank, in a game against the Jags, who knocked them out of the postseason last year?
I can see them bouncing back, but you also have to define what bouncing back looks like, because even back in the day when you had teams that were clearly better than the other, whenever you start off the NFL season, there's always going to be like these tight games to start, and then teams start to separate themselves from the rest. But as you noticed last year with the Cincinnati Bengals making it to the Super Bowl, there's so much parity in the NFL right now that any team can literally get beat on any given Sunday. And I think that we saw that in Week 18 when the Jags beat the Colts. And so when I look at them playing in this game and the way that the Jags were able to perform against the Commanders last week, like, I wouldn't be surprised who wins this game. Like, if the Jags win, I wouldn't be surprised. If the Colts win, I wouldn't be surprised. I know going into last week, because early on when they showed the spreads, I was like, there's really no reason for the Colts to be favored this much against the Texans. And that was just because of the way the Texans played the Chargers last year. That's the one thing that stood out to me. And so when I kind of go from a macro level and kind of wrap this all together, I feel that the Jags are a team that's talented on defense. They have some guys who can make plays when necessary. Christian Kirk is going to be a monster. He's going to be targeted a lot. So whenever they have props on him, if it's in the range of having like maybe 5 or 6 receptions or something like that, I feel pretty good about taking the over. And yeah, who's going to win this game? I really think it's a toss-up.
Yeah, you mentioned the Jags defense being good, but I still look at last week. They gave up 390 yards and 28 points to the Washington Commanders, who have Carson Wentz at this point. It's going to be interesting to see what the Colts are able to do against the Jags this week. Do you think that this is a place where maybe a guy like Jonathan Taylor or even Matt Ryan kind of finds his footing in Indy in Jacksonville? For the Indy team in Jacksonville. Words, Jared, sometimes. Yeah. But thank you. Yes, in Indy and Jacksonville. But do you think this is a place where maybe Matt Ryan can get it going for the Colts and maybe they get their first win of the season?
Good question. So when I dug into the Colts Texans box
that was
score,
a really big sigh. That was a really big sigh.
Right?
I know.
Like, who?
Well, you know,
somebody
it's
go
funny
get this man his inhaler.
Man, let me just take a sip real quick. Okay, now I think I'm okay.
Oh, God.
So when I dug deep with my nerd goggles into the Indy Houston box score, I did not like what I saw with Matt Ryan. Average depth of target was well below average. Total EPA was negative. And again, the Texans are feisty, so I don't want to read too much into it. But the whole reason why you bring Matt Ryan in, and sixth quarterback in 6 years for the Colts, is to bring instant stability. You want to bring a veteran in who is going to hit the ground running right away and not need a transformative period to learn the offense and get everyone in the right place. And there's a ton of weapons on this offense. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman is, maybe one of the best receivers in that top tier, at least in the NFL. And that's what we've seen with his advanced metrics over his first couple of seasons. But then I look at this Jaguars team, and I saw some feistiness against the Commanders. I mean, they came back, picked off Carson Wentz a couple times in the second half, took a lead, couldn't hold the lead, but definitely showed themselves to be at least a unit that is going to compete this year. And then I look at, again, the Frank Reich kind of vibe, and it hasn't been strong in week 1. We already talked about that. That's why we put the Texans in a teaser last week. Should have bet them straight up, but whatever. I'll take the W on the teaser. You flash forward to now this week, and he faces another team. Week 1 is clearly his kryptonite. The Jaguars are another just dagger for him. See, my dog's going nuts right now about it. 1-6-1 against the spread. Dogs might be barking in this game. 1-6-1 against the spread for Frank Reich against the Jags, including 5 straight-up losses, 3 outright as a favorite, 2 outright losses as a double-digit favorite. Of course, the Week 18 game last year being front and center. So this is a game that the Colts offensive line should dominate. Alec Pierce is in concussion protocol. We'll see what happens with his status. So maybe the weapons aren't as deep for Matt Ryan. But I'll be honest, this is a game that the Colts should handle. But they didn't handle it last week, and I don't know if they're going to be able to handle it this week. So I'm staying away from this one because on paper, I think Indy should win, but I think Jacksonville's got a little starch to them here.
Yeah, under Frank Reich, the Colts are 0-4, both straight up and against the spread at Jacksonville. So that's some interesting stat to look out for heading into week 2. Another divisional matchup that we want to get into, and Jared, I know it's one of your best bets of the week, the Seahawks take it on the 49ers. This line opened up at 8.5. Now the 49ers laying 9.5 points. It's been a really weird start at this point for the NFC West. I was saying this to Jared Tank earlier this week, that if someone would have bet me $500 that the only team with a win in the NFC West after week 1 is the Seahawks, I would have been like, go take a hike, man. Like, no chance. They're the only team in the NFC West with a win at this point. They dominated the Broncos in Monday Night Football. Jared, can this be a letdown spot for them? Because Geno Smith looked incredible. 13 of 13 to start the game. Can he keep that rolling?
No, he can't. And I love Geno. I love Geno. I was ringing the bell for Geno on Monday night. And I think there's a lot of things to like there. But I think this is one of those spots, and I'm sure Tank can attest to this, Monday night emotional win, arguably the most emotional win in the Pete Carroll era, with Russell Wilson back in town, the ridiculous, antics at the end of the game with the field goal and all the, the drama that led up to it. Now you have to go face a pissed off San Francisco team that, again, we talked about it a little bit off the top of the show. The pass block win rate for Chicago was almost 90% against the Niners front that some might say is one of the best in the league. Probably the most surprising analytic I pulled from week 1 was just how good the Bears offensive line was against the Niners offensive line. Again, I think the conditions played a factor there, but doesn't matter. The result was what it was. The Niners went to Chicago. They laid an egg. Now they come back home and they face a divisional opponent. So I think Trey Lance needs to play a lot better in this game. You can't play much worse than he did on Sunday. But again, the conditions, I hope, was a factor. George Kittle's status here will be a factor. Didn't practice. Again, we're taping this on a Wednesday. Didn't practice, but I'm hearing positive things for him, trending in a positive direction, hopefully throughout the week. That is a key status to keep an eye on as we get closer to Sunday. But overall, I just expect a lot more positive regression from this San Francisco team, especially the pass rush against the really bad Seattle offensive line. We saw Bradley Chubb just work Charles Cross off the edge. That was probably the biggest bright spot for the Broncos defense in that Monday night game against Seattle, was Chubb on the edge against Cross, causing a lot of havoc in the backfield. And I expect this Niners offense to really move the ball effectively on a Seattle defense that won't be without Jamal Adams, and have some other issues too with their scheme and kind of how they got their ducks in a row against, again, a Niners offense that I think is very talented. Trey Lance has to play up to expectation. If he can, I think San Francisco puts a big number on the board in a bounce back effort this Sunday.
Tank, when you look at a guy like Trey Lance, kind of learning on the fly at this point, and I was watching Get Up, and Dan Orlovsky was talking about how he saw him kind of revert back to some of his old mechanics, because you're trying to win a game, but at the same time, you're making those little mistakes, reverting back to your old style of play that maybe isn't the correct style of play. What did you see from Trey Lance, and how can he improve in this one where the 49ers can maybe cover the spread, win by 10 points or more?
Yeah, I really feel like it's hard to judge the Niners and the Bears for that matter, just because of the conditions. And when you play games like that, like scheme goes out the window and everything else. Like you said, like for the Bears offensive line to perform that well against what we would think is like one of the better defenses in the league, it's pretty astonishing. And that shows you how weather could kind of average everything out in a game. But I expect the Niners to bounce back. I think that they have a lot of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. Debo Samuel, we know we can do as a running back and as a wide receiver. Brandon Ayuk is one of the more explosive players in the offense, and it seems like they want to get him a little bit more integrated. I hate the fact that they lost Elijah Mitchell, because I was looking for him to do really good things this year. So interested to see how they're going to replace that running game, whether it's going to be Wilson or someone else. The defense should be strong, but the one thing that I'm going to say is like kind of what I've alluded to in prior games that we've talked about. Man, like 9.5, that's a lot of points. This is a divisional matchup where like when you play in these divisional games, like you generally don't like any team in your division, but these two teams really hate each other. And so now you have a Seahawks team that has a little bit of confidence after beating the Denver team that has like one of the better quarterbacks in the league. They have some weapons in
Mm-hmm.
Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. They have a really good defense where you bring in Red and Greg when you have Chubb, Bradley Chubb, and then you also have a young cornerback, Patrick Surtain, that plays really good ball. And so you're like, hey, we compete against some really good guys and we won the game. Like, why can't we go down there to Santa Clara and do some work again in week 2? So I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco 49ers bounce back, but 9.5 seems like a lot of points to me.
Yeah, 9.5 seems like a lot. And it's also a lot with the Packers taking on the Bears because that's how many points that they're laying, too. The Packers playing their second consecutive divisional game in weeks 1 and week 2, the NFC North. People underestimated the Bears against the 49ers. Like you said, Jared, it was biblical rains, torrential downpour, absolute monsoon, whatever you want to call it. But it was a lot of water. They were basically playing in a flood. And the Packers left a lot to still be seen against the Vikings. Aaron Rodgers, to me, looked completely lost without Davante Adams. I know his O-line was banged up. He was sacked 4 times. But, Tank, do you feel like Chicago could maybe make this game closer than what was necessarily expected after what we saw last week against the 49ers and the fight that they had as a team?
I think when you go back and you think about how close the Bears played the Packers last year, when they actually had Davante
Mm-hmm.
Adams, and I felt like Justin Fields came in and he gave life to not only the team but the city of Chicago. Like, hey, we're actually kind of competing with the Green Bay Packers, and then you pull off a miracle. And like the funniest thing about that Bears 49ers game too is like once the Bears got up 19-0, like just the sky opened up and it was just pouring rain. It was almost like it was meant to be. Like the football guys were with them. So can the football guys be with them again? Because I remember there was one play I was looking at in that Green Bay Packers game against the Minnesota Vikings, and it seemed like the entire Vikings defense was breathing down Aaron Rodgers' neck. And the only thing it made me think of was Half Baked when my guy was like, Lord, if you're listening, help! And that's what it felt like Aaron Rodgers was doing because there was no escape from that Minnesota Vikings defense. And so if the Bears can channel that and aggravate Aaron Rodgers and he doesn't have anyone that can separate like Davante Adams, like if there's a will, there's a way. And trust me, the way that the
Mm-hmm.
Chicago Bears are playing right now, there's a will. And so that's why I'll go to it again. Even though they're playing in Green Bay, that seems like way too many points for me right now,
Yeah.
especially this early in the season with a divisional game.
Totally. I totally agree with you there. And it's one of those things, Jared, too, that can they win by 10 when they only scored 7 against the Vikings last weekend? Like, I'm leaning in this position toward taking the Bears and the points.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers. What was the line? Doctor said I need a backiotomy. You want to quote some half-baked? Aaron probably is gonna need a backiotomy after the Vikings and Zadarius Smith. It is kind of funny. Everyone said Zadarius Smith is done,
Yeah.
and then he goes to Minnesota and just eats in the backfield of Aaron Rodgers all day. The tackles, Jenkins and Bakhtiari. I mean, listen, those guys need to be healthy if the Green Bay has a chance to be successful this year. Period. End of story. Those are bookend tackles. And they're not healthy right now. And it's disappointing because Bakhtiari seems like he hasn't been healthy in 2 years. This is a spot where Aaron Rodgers has excelled in his past. 29-13 and a push ATS in his career after a loss. And he's covering by an average of almost 4 points in those games. 10-0 ATS in his last 10 games following a loss. But is this
Love
the
that.
same Packers team that –
No,
again,
it's
in years
not.
past. Exactly. And I think that's where that trend doesn't, you have to add context to the numbers. The context this year is I don't know if this is the same Packers team. But let's talk about the other side of the ball for a second. Because the Green Bay defense graded out as the 3rd worst tackling unit in week 1. They had major problems stopping the run and Dalvin Cook. They're preparing for a very different scheme this week, too. You go from preparing for Kirk Cousins, stationary quarterback that likes to push the ball down the field. Great run game, of course. But now you go to a mobile quarterback with more RPOs. Not as much deep pushing the ball down the field, more in the flat, in space, getting Justin Fields out on the edge. Completely different scheme for this Green Bay defense to have to prepare for this week. I think the Packers D will be better tackling and getting after the passer than they were last week because, again, when you're the 3rd worst, there's going to be some positive regression. Kenny Clark graded out very well on the interior of the defensive line. That was the only bright spot that I can speak of for Green Bay's defense on Sunday against Minnesota. That, I think, is a matchup edge because the interior of the Bears offensive line is not very strong. The entire Bears offensive line isn't very strong, but especially the interior is something I think maybe Green Bay can exploit. The Bears also didn't stop the run well against San Francisco. So Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, you want to look to some props, that would be a point of matchup advantage, I think, for Green Bay. And to me, listen, when your wide receivers are bad or inexperienced, the best friend of a quarterback is the running game. So to me, that's what I would lean on if I was Aaron Rodgers in this game. We'll see what that looks like. But scheme-wise, I think you can make a case that Green Bay is going to bounce back and play better this week. But let's be honest, they're not. This isn't your daddy's Packers. This is a different look with Aaron Rodgers and this new wide receiver core. So I don't really know how he's going to bounce back, but there are some matchup advantages I think to be had for Green Bay in this game.
Yeah, Green Bay is 8-2 against the spread in its last 10 games against Chicago. But again, it's not the same Green Bay team that we're used to seeing. It's going to be interesting to see how that game plays out. Well, that's it for the divisional matchups. What about winless teams against winless teams? Teams trying to right the ship at this point. The Falcons taking on the Rams. The Rams opened up as 10-point favorites. Now they're 10.5-point favorites. Two very different games for these teams last week. The Bills absolutely obliterated the Rams. The Rams shut out completely in the second half. Is Stafford's arm okay after that game? 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. And for the Falcons, they blew a 16-point fourth quarter lead to the Saints and lost on a 51-yard field goal. And let me tell you, I live here in Atlanta, Tank. Jared already knows this. I was watching with all my Falcons fans and just seeing their faces deflated after that win, I just felt really bad. And guess what? They're probably going to go 0-2 after this week because they ain't losing to the Rams. Tank, what are your expectations for the reigning Super Bowl champs at this point to come back and maybe get a win, get to 500 to start the season here?
Well, in order to get to 500, their dogs need to play like dogs. Like Cooper Kupp had himself a great game because he always has a great game. But Matthew Stafford, he has to be better. He can't turn the ball over. That's one of the props that everybody jumps on a weekly basis. If there's a Matthew Stafford prop about anything with a half interception or even 1.5, sometimes you jumping on that too, just
Take
because
the
he loves to
over.
throw the ball to another team. But when you look at it from that defensive perspective, like Aaron Donald needs to be that dude that's wreaking havoc on the opposing team's offensive line and making sure that that quarterback is uncomfortable. And Jalen Ramsey just can't give up the plays that he was giving up last week. And I think if they can go ahead and shore those things up, they should be okay. But the one thing is that -10 is a lot of points. And I understand that the Falcons haven't been winning a lot of games lately, but they have some pieces on that offense that are kind of scary. You have a mobile quarterback in Marcus Mariota. I feel that Corduroy Patterson is definitely underrated because last week he had 20-something touches and over 100-something yards rushing. And there was a game last year against the Saints where he really didn't rush for too many yards, but he had over 100 yards receiving. So they can get him off in any way, shape, or form that they need to. But I believe the X factor in this game is going to be Kyle Pitts because if the Rams haven't showed up with one of their deficiencies was last year, it was teams attacking them with either big wide receivers or their tight ends over the middle. If you could think back to Max Williams last year for the Arizona Cardinals, eating the Rams up alive in the game where when the Rams got blown out by the Cardinals. And now you tell me if Max Williams could do that against your defense, best believe Kyle Pitts can, because that dude is a monster. So I'm interested to see how they're going to try to defend that Atlanta offense. It's just that the Atlanta defense needs to be able to hold up their own. And if they do what they did against the Saints, then that -10 may need to be about -30.
I know Jared hates when I talk about fantasy, but I will say that Kyle Pitts had the third worst ever fantasy game in his career last week. I'm just saying, I may not have him on my
This is the
team,
bounce
or I
back.
may have him. Yeah, this is a bounce back game for him. The one thing that worries me about the Falcons is their secondary. I think Stafford's going to be able to take advantage of them with Cooper Kupp. They allowed 2 touchdowns and 269 yards to Jameis Winston. So I'm interested, Jared. Do you think that Stafford can take advantage of the Falcons' defense, especially their secondary with a guy like Cooper Kupp?
I do. I'm glad Tank mentioned Kyle Pitts. -1.5 EPA. Expected points.
You hate to see it.
against the Saints. I'd have to. I don't have his full numbers in front of me, but I'd be willing to bet that was probably the worst game of his career. That needs to change because, I mean, if you were going to ask me what's the one player that Atlanta's going to rely on this year to make some explosive plays, that Kyle Pitts would be the first guy I would say. If you want to talk about the bounce back appeal of the Rams, that is something to, digest. McVay 11-6 against the spread in his career after a loss, 2-1 last year. So that's something positive for the Rams. Another thing that is really positive is McVay is 10-5 against the number with a rest advantage. Of course, the Rams have 10 days off. The Falcons played Sunday. That's something that number has some context to me, because if you think about Sean McVay as a head coach, maybe sometimes he overthinks, but he is a very, chessboard, moving the pieces around, very analytical approach. So I think all of the RPOs and all of those explosive plays that Atlanta was able to generate on Sunday against a very good Saints defense, well, that's now on tape. And Sean McVay is sitting there with his defensive staff, and he's probably going over all of those things and trying to figure out ways to combat what was a pretty, I would say, impressive Atlanta performance on offense. I know they gave up some big plays late and they didn't get over the finish line, but they still dropped 26 points on what I would say is, again, one of the better defenses in the league. So there is some positives to take from the Rams situation. And I know the number is big, but I don't really think Atlanta is going to have the same success that they did on offense than they did against the Saints. Another thing to keep in mind is that Atlanta defense got absolutely gashed on the ground. A 61% success rate for the Saints on offensive running plays and 100% success rate on late down rushing plays. So 3rd and short, 4th and short, New Orleans got what they needed to get. That's how you keep drives alive. And frankly, that's how you cover big spreads. So I think the Rams would be the side I would lean here. I'm not betting this game, but I can point to a lot of positives to take from LA and some negatives to poke in what Atlanta's performance showed me in that game on Sunday. Very happy they covered because we had them in a teaser, but I would expect, especially, I mean, goodness gracious, see Arthur Smith's press conference after that game. He was unhinged. We'll see what that looks like this week as they prepare for, I think, a more difficult opponent than they faced on Sunday.
To be honest, unhinged may or may not be one of my favorite words of all time. Unhinged. I'm going to start using that all the time in every single sentence. Fun fact for you guys, though, since 2014, teams that lose by 10-plus points in week 1 go on to cover the spread 61% of the time in week 2. So, Tank, I know it's a lot of points, but is the trend your friend here in this position? We will see heading into week 2. Another game that I'm interested to talk about, the Bengals taking on the Cowboys in Dallas. The Bengals were laying 7 points. Now they're laying 7.5. And the Cowboys just got absolutely decimated with injuries last week in week 1. No Dak Prescott at this point. Tank, how does that affect the Cowboys heading forward the rest of the season? Because I know the woes in Dallas are feeling pretty blue right now. Everyone's not feeling very good about their team heading into the rest of the season at this point.
Yeah, it's going to probably be hard out there for those Cowboys. I said something earlier this week where whenever you lose your starting quarterback, the opposing defense just tries to take away the run game. And if you can imagine the Bengals taking away Zeke and Tony Pollard, then that's going to put my man Cooper Rush on the forefront to try to beat the game, try to beat the Bengals through the air. And I really don't see that happening. I feel like the running back production is going to look something similar to Adrian Peterson and Le'Veon Bell in the ring last week. And if CeeDee Lamb is going to get double teamed and you're going to try to force some of these other pass catchers to beat them, I don't really know if that's going to happen. The only saving grace for the Cowboys may be that defense. The one thing that the Bengals did do in week 1 was turn the ball over. And the one thing that the Cowboys defense was really good at in 2021 was getting turnovers. They led the league in that. So if they're able to do that, they can try to keep Dallas in the mix. But actually, when you look at a team that is good as Cincinnati, I don't know if they're going to have T. Higgins or not, but it may not matter. That -7 at -7.5, it may not be enough. If they come in and they play with that energy that I believe Joe Burrow is going to come into Jerry World with.
Yeah, you talked about the forcing the turnover as well. Joe Burrow threw 4 interceptions last week, sacked 7 times, threw a pick 6 on his first pass attempt of 2022. Can the Cowboys, Jared, take advantage of a guy like Joe Burrow, who maybe doesn't have the best O-line in the NFL right now, where he's running for his life half the time?
I would bet the under on Joe Burrow's under 3.5 interceptions this week. There's, I think we're gonna see some positive regression from Joe in the turnover category. So I'm glad that we talked about the Cowboys defense first, because let's be honest, how the heck are we going to handicap what we're going to see from Cooper Rush? I have no idea. I would expect not up to the level of Dak Prescott, but let's be honest, Dak did not look good in that game on Sunday night. So maybe there is some upside with Cooper Rush. I would lean to the no there. Connor McGovern, left guard, good player, not great, but good offensive lineman, also left that game with an ankle injury. Dallas really got banged up in that game. I don't want to call it, a season-ending type of performance because it's week 1, but of all the teams in week 1, they probably came out of that game the worst. The defense, though, I think is a massive concern for me. And when I look at the matchup and yes, turnovers could absolutely be the great equalizer here, but the Cowboys secondary against Joe Burrow and this Bengals wide receiver core is, I think, a very bad matchup for Dallas. Now, T. Higgins, from what I'm reading, is trending in the right direction. Concussion protocol, good luck handicapping that. I'm going to assume he's not going to play. Let's say that he doesn't play, and it's Chase, and it's Boyd, and there's a couple of other matchup edges, I think, with Mixon and Pirine, but Dallas allowed Tom Brady to have a 70% success rate on early down passing plays. And that, to me, is an opportunity for Joe Burrow, because when you look at the Bengals last season, over the back half of the season, which is really when Joe got going and got in sync with those receivers in Jamar's rookie year, he had the 7th highest, the Bengals did, EPA per play on early down passing plays. And that, to me, is the advantage here. Anthony Brown's the target, huge liability. Tom Brady had 6 completions on 8 targets for 108 yards when Anthony Brown was the closest defender. That includes that bomb to Julio Jones for 50 yards when Brown was looking around like, where's the ball? And it was in Julio's hands. I think this is a huge edge for Cincinnati. Early down, play action, pushing the ball down the field, get an early lead, and then, oh, by the way, Cooper Rush, good luck trying to come back. I mean, I think the Bengals defense graded out okay against Pittsburgh, even though the Steelers offense is what it is with Trubisky. So I see an edge here for the Bengals wide receivers deep down the field, early down play action with Joe Burrow pushing it against a Dallas secondary that really looks susceptible on Sunday night against the Bucs.
Dallas is 1-4, guys, against the spread in their last 5 home games. I think it's going to be 1-5 against the spread now after this game this week. Another game that I want to talk about, winless teams against winless teams. The last one, Cardinals taking on the Raiders. And Tank, I'm going to just let you cover this one completely. The line opened at Raiders laying 5. Now the Raiders are laying 6. The Cardinals playing against a second AFC West opponent. Patrick Mahomes last week threw for 5 touchdowns against their defense. If they do not fix their defensive issues, things are going to get real ugly real quick against guys like Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Raiders, they played the Chargers well. They were in that game until the very end, and you already mentioned it. Derek Carr was able to kind of pick up with Devontae Adams where he left off with Aaron Rodgers. Like, Devontae Adams looked unstoppable. He had guys out there on the field running around in circles, and Darren Waller made some plays in the game. I thought that Hunter Renfrow would be a little bit more involved in that game, but I feel like he'll probably be more involved in this one. And Josh Jacobs, on the limited carries that he had, he actually looked good. So I feel like that Raiders offense is going to be something that the Arizona Cardinals are going to have to deal with. And if they look any way, shape, or form like they did against the Chiefs, then it's going to be a long day for them. And then on the flip side, if Chandler Jones and Max Crosby are able to get off and get to Kyler Murray and try to get him off the spot to where he's trying to tuck and run, and he does, look, and that's the thing too, like the Cardinals, they have some injuries that they're dealing with. You have Nuke Hopkins that's out, for the third of the season or something like that. So they're not at full strength. So if Marquise Brown can't step up, if Zach Ertz isn't healthy and he's not making big plays for him, if AJ Green can't channel what he was doing for the Bengals like 7, 8 years ago, then it's going to be tough sledding for the Arizona Cardinals yet and again. And if they get their heads beat in by another AFC West squad, we may be looking at the
Mm-hmm.
Cardinals like going from in the playoffs last year, like, wow, they may be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and we're only 2 weeks in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the Cardinals are able to do. You look at their game last week, 14 of their 21 points came in the fourth quarter. At that point, the Chiefs have kind of thrown in the red flag. Also, they've only converted on 3 of 12 third down attempts last week. So both of those things are going to need to get better this week if they're going to want to beat the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's take a look at some of the leftovers. And Jared, I'm coming to you with this next one. We always go back for more the next day unless it's sushi. Nothing is worse than leftover sushi. The Jets kind of looking like leftover sushi at this point. They're taking on the Browns this week. The Browns laying 6.5 points against the New York Jets. I'm sorry about that. The Browns offense, not extremely exciting with Jacoby Brissett, but defense is good enough to hold down close games. Joe Flacco, though, 3-16 in his last 19 NFL starts. I am not backing a team that he is playing for. I'm sorry, Jared, and I'm sorry for your New York Jets.
You don't have to apologize, Lauren. I'm fading them this week, too. It's an ideal teaser spot. Move the Browns in a low total game from 6 to a pick 'em. I don't understand how the Jets offense creates a whole lot of movement in this game, especially up front. Because when you look at Fant and especially the left or the right tackle, Max Mitchell, the rookie, who was just a disaster, they didn't play well at all. Fant graded out average, and again, Mitchell was a total disaster against the Ravens front. That's good. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ravens are a solid defensive line. But let's be honest, the Browns are better. Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney were absolutely fantastic. And then, oh, by the way, the interior of the Jets' offensive line, especially the right side with Lake and Tomlinson, graded out very poorly against the pass and the run. On the left side, Elijah Vera Tucker is really the only bright spot I can speak of about this Jets offensive line, but I don't think that's going to be enough to keep Joe Flacco upright because also, let's be honest, that dude's a statue in the pocket. Not a whole lot of movement. So the part of this handicap, though, for Cleveland I don't like is their offense scoring enough to cover a number if you just want to lay it against the spread. Jacoby Brissett, negative EPA per play against the Panthers in week 1, despite a really good running game to help him out. Nick Chubb had a 52% success rate against a pretty good Carolina front. The Jets' run defense actually held up okay, held Baltimore to 3 yards per carry, and I think that's going to be the strength. If you want to call the Jets' defense a strength, I think the run defense is kind of the strength of that unit this season. The first line move here was also from 6.5 down to 6, so there was some sharp money early in the market for New York. That will keep me away from laying it against the number, but I still think Cleveland wins this game because I don't see Joe Flacco marching in and getting a victory against the Browns defensive line. So while laying it with this Browns offense and getting them to score enough points to cover a touchdown might be a stretch too far, I think this is a pretty good teaser spot this week for Cleveland.
Yeah, the Browns sacked Baker Mayfield 4 times last week. The Jets O-line still working out their kinks at this point. The Browns defense just needs to make Flacco feel kind of uncomfortable in this spot. Another game that I might feel a little uncomfortable with, Tank, I'm coming to you with this one. The Commanders taking on the Lions, and guess what? For the first time since week 11 of 2020, my Detroit Lions are the favorites in a game. I am so excited about this. The line opened up at 2.5. It is now 1.5. The Lions laying 1.5 against the Commanders. 2 of the top offenses, Tank, in the NFL going head-to-head in a week 2 clash. But I'm actually not kidding because if you look at some of the numbers, both teams are at the top of the NFL charts in terms of offensive numbers from week 1, which is really crazy. What are your expectations for the Commanders taking on the Lions this week in Detroit?
Well, honestly, this has the potential to be a good game. It's one of those games that could be a sneaky shootout, like you said. I mean, you had a Lions team that I felt was pretty much dominated by the Philadelphia Eagles, yet at the same time, the Eagles defense got a little bit lax at the end and just kind of let them back into the game. But when you look at the score, high scoring game, and I mean, the one thing that you can say is that DeAndre Swift got off from the very start. Like he started that game cooking, and I believe that gave the Lions life, and that gave them this impression that they can compete with Philadelphia. Because if you remember last year, Philadelphia blew the doors off of them. But you also have a Washington Commander team that Curtis Samuel, if this dude can stay healthy, he was running the ball for him. He was catching the ball all over the field. And if you have to focus on trying to take away Curtis Samuel, scary Terry on the outside, and then this rookie Jahan Dotson, like they have some weapons. The one thing is that Carson Wentz has to protect the ball. Carson Wentz can't do what he does and just turn the ball over and just do stupid things. He almost seems to do it in every game. That's what got him up out of there in Indianapolis, and that's why he's in Washington right now. If he can protect the ball and let those weapons that he has around him go to work, then they have a chance. But then you could pretty much say the same thing about Jared Goff too. And so when you have two teams like this that can turn the ball over, yet they have enough weapons on their side of the ball. Like you look at Detroit, they have DeAndre Swift, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have DJ Chark that if you can catch him over the top, that dude can still run. So I mean, you have some interesting plays in this game. And so, what's the total in this one? Do we know?
The total
48.
48.
It's dropping a little
48?
bit after the Swift injury.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, if you can catch it and have an idea that maybe Swift's going to be in, I mean, there may be a possibility that we can go over and they can have a lot of points in this game.
Yeah, fun stat for you guys. Carson Wentz and Patrick Mahomes were the only two quarterbacks last week to throw for 300-plus yards and 4 more touchdowns. So Carson Wentz in a category of its own with the one and only Patrick Mahomes. Let's take it to the Panthers-Giants game. This line opened up at 2.5. The Giants now laying 2 points. Baker Mayfield not able to get it done against his former team last weekend. The Giants coming off of a massive win against the Titans that also knocked me out of my survivor pool. So I'm still a little sad about that, but that's neither here nor there. But Brian Daboll's Giants tenure started off on a sweet note, Jared. Can they do it again, make it 2-0 to start the season?
I don't have a ton on this game, but I will say the line movement was notable. This was a pick 'em in the look-ahead market last week, so you can look-ahead market. You can bet on week 2 games before the week 1 games take place. Then on Sunday, the whole market closes, and it reopens later that night, maybe Monday morning. So reopening line after the Giants win, after the Panthers loss, was 2.5. And again, say what you want about those performances. I think the Giants showed some fight, showed some heart. Brian Daboll showed some stones. But at the end of the day, there were some issues there that I could certainly poke holes with. And the Panthers, I think you could say that there were some positives and some negatives to take with you. But now that this line is moved in a pretty significant direction, once you approach that key number of 3, there might be some value on the other side for Carolina. Say you want to tease it. Say you want to move it through those key numbers of 3 and 7. I think that's a fair strategy. I wouldn't run with the stream here and bet the Giants laying 2.5. I think you're betting not a bad number, but a number that's a little unfavorable. So that's the only analysis I have here, and it's market analysis. The matchups to me, you probably can make a case for betting both sides if you really dug deep, but I think the line movement says Carolina might have a little bit more value at this stage.
Saquon Barkley absolutely went off last week. The Panthers came out the first 3 quarters, looked like they were sleeping. They need to use Christian McCaffrey more if they're going to want to win this game. One more game to talk about in terms of the leftovers. Leftover sushi also. The Patriots were looking like leftover sushi. Sorry, Take, to talk about your former team like that, but now they're laying 2 points against the Steelers. It's really surprising to me that they are favored in this game. They looked horrendous last week, got embarrassed by the Dolphins. What are your expectations this week? They're the 2-point favorites going into Pittsburgh.
I mean, obviously, I don't think there would be 2-point favorites if TJ Watt wasn't out, because honestly, I feel like if TJ Watt was healthy, there may have been a possibility for the Steelers to start off the season 4-0. If you look at their first 4 games on their schedule, this would be the toughest one with New England. That being said, I think this has an opportunity to be a really good game, from the simple fact that there was so much said about New England's offense going into week 1. And I have to admit that they didn't look the best, but at times, I mean, they were able to move the ball efficiently. They were able to run the ball effectively. Mac Jones was able to kind of spread around the ball around a lot. He was able to use Jacoby Myers, and Devontae Parker had a catch here or there. But I mean, they had some key mistakes that you really usually don't see from a Bill Belichick team, where Mac Jones gets sacked and then Melvin Ingram ends up getting a touchdown. And then you have Jalen Waddle at the end of the first half, who's able to split 2 defensive backs and go in for a touchdown. So I feel like if New England plays the sound football that they're accustomed to playing, that game is actually a lot closer than what it ended up being. And so if you have a Pittsburgh team that struggled on offense with Mitchell Trubisky, and you have a defense that doesn't have the best playmaker on that team and one of the better playmakers in the league in TJ Watt, then there's a way for the Patriots to kind of keep this close. And you may feel, I mean, honestly, just for the Patriots to be favored based on what they put on tape so far, they shouldn't be favored. But I guess I understand if you're just looking at it from a macro perspective of like, this is New England Patriots. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, basically you're saying that it's the New England Patriots, even
Yeah,
though they're not
TJ
the
Watt,
same New England
Najee Harris.
Patriots.
Yeah, it's the New England Patriots. They're the New England Patriots. That's it. Enough to be said. Bill Belichick, I think he's going to slap him back into shape. We'll see what happens. TJ Watt, Najee Harris, both suffered significant injuries in that game. They're not going to be available for this game. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers adjust in the absence of those two guys. We all always get the Sunday scaries, guys, okay? I know football helps that, but want to know what makes the Monday scaries a little bit better is not having just one, but having two Monday night football games this coming Monday. We have the Titans and the Bills, first of all. That line opened up at 10. It is still sitting at 10 right now. The Titans want to avoid losing the first two games of the year, but that's going to be a tough challenge heading up to Buffalo because they proved why they're the Super Bowl favorites this year. They steamrolled over the reigning Super Bowl champs on Thursday Night Football, and Josh Allen threw for 3 touchdowns, ran for another one. Buffalo's defense was shining piece too. 3 interceptions. Jared, do you expect them to steamroll over the Titans the way that they did against the Rams in Week 1?
I thought the season ended on Thursday night. I thought we crowned the Bills Super Bowl champs, and that was it, right?
Pretty
Like
much.
Game 1, Week 1,
so just
baby. Let's go.
stop the tape. Stop the rest of the shows. We're done. The season's over. The Bills are the champs. No, obviously, I'm just kidding. This line's moved a lot. It's gone from 7.5. Now it's 10. There's not much to like from Tennessee's performance. I expected a ton of regression there, but I will say this. When I dug into that box score against the Giants, Ryan Tannehill's numbers popped. And that was surprising for me because who does Ryan Tannehill not have with him this year? Arguably the two of the best receivers in the league, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones.
Yes.
So I was surprised to see Ryan's numbers, again, above expectation based off of maybe where a lot of people thought he would be without those two guys by his side. So that was a positive. The Titans defense to me is a sell. I think the Bills defense improved somehow, despite the fact that they led the league in EPA per play last season. You add a guy like Von Miller. That is an element they did not have last year. And it creates a whole different game plan for how you try to attack what is, again, Sean McDermott's been a fantastic defensive schemer throughout the course of his career. Now he has a shiny new toy on the edge to get after the passer. It creates a lot more pressure on Ryan Tannehill and any quarterback that's going to face this Bills defense this year. The line probably stinks and is too big, but I ain't betting the Titans. So either you figure out a creative way to play the Bills first half, first quarter, whatever, team total. I don't want anything to do with the Titans in this game, that's for sure.
Yeah, the Bills' defense forced Matt Stafford last week into throws that he didn't want to make. And against Ryan Tannehill, who didn't throw for a single touchdown last week and 1 interception, no chance. Tank, when you look at a game like this, I feel like Josh Allen thrives when games are close at half. I don't think this game's going to be close at half, but we saw it last Thursday. The game was tied at halftime. He came out and he did what he does best. I feel like Derrick Henry and the Titans' run game could maybe keep it close for a while, maybe go into halftime close, but the Bills are going to pull away, and Josh Allen's going to do what Josh Allen does best, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, this game is intriguing to me just because you think about the 2 times that these teams have linked up before. I think about Derrick Henry basically making Josh Norman like a social media celebrity with that stiff arm. And he like literally stiff arm the soul out of it, and Josh Norman still can't live that down. And then in the game last year where we felt like the Bills were going to come in and kind of right the ship, and then the Titans were able to pull off a really big win again. And this kind of all reminds me of like what the Bills are trying to do to kind of redeem themselves from last year. Because when I was looking at week 1, I felt like the Bills are going to go in and have a really good game against the Rams because of the way they lost to the Steelers last year in week 1. And also, by the way, that the Kansas City Chiefs beat them in the playoffs. And now you have a team that's been like your nemesis the past couple of times that you play them, and not only beat you, but just had like these kind of memorable plays where they've just kind of embarrassed some of the guys on your squad. So I feel like the Bills are going to kind of take that to heart and also want to build on what they did in week 1 and try to go out and put another great performance. And the Titans are a team that where you feel like they should be down and out. They go and do what they did last year when they go into LA and then they pull off an amazing upset against the Rams and that defense shows up. That defense has the ability with the dogs that they have on there with Jeffrey Simmons, Kevin Byard back there, safety. Like they can make plays and in opportune times is whether they can do it against this Bills team that seems like no matter what you put in front of them, they're like a freight train that's not going to be slowed down by anyone this season.
Yeah, the Bills coming into the season wanting to totally redeem themselves. The team that doesn't necessarily need to redeem themselves after week 1 was the Vikings because they came out and they looked red hot. They're taking on the Eagles this week. That line currently at Eagles 2.5-point favorites. I'm not as high on the Eagles though, and Jared, I know you feel the same way after their week 1 win against the Lions, but a lot of time to shake off the rust, gel together before playoffs. But the Vikings are looking to start the season 2-0. For the first time since 2016, and they made split-pea soup out of the Packers last week. And I know Aaron Rodgers was missing his top receiver, 2 linemen. It still was a really impressive showing from the Vikings. So, Tank, I want to come to you here because Justin Jefferson was out of his freaking mind. Darius Slay, James Bradbury are going to need to keep him in check this week. Do you think that they will be able to live up to that task and shut down a guy like Justin Jefferson?
Shut them down? No, they won't be able to shut them down. And I believe that we've learned that, and that's no knock on them because I believe those cats are ballers. Like Darius Slay is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. But what we learned from Sean McVay, the way that he always is able to scheme up Cooper Kupp, and you're like, how is he always that open? Like we saw that in week 1 with Justin Jefferson because whenever you're playing against the Vikings, you should always know where this man is on the field, and there should always be someone in close proximity because he's that dangerous. Yet and still, there were times where he's just running wide open down the field, like streaking like Frank the Tank, and you like, how are you letting this dude do this? And so, but the thing is that you not only have Justin Jefferson, but you have Dalvin Cook, who's also one of the most dangerous weapons in the NFL. You have Adam Thielen that can ball out, and you have Irv Smith. Even though this offense, like it is similar to the Los Angeles Rams, where it's more wide receiver centric, but Irv Smith is a dude. Like he's an athlete. He can make plays if the ball is thrown to him, and Kirk Cousins can distribute the ball, and he can play really solidly. So I feel like that Vikings offense is going to be something to tend with, and the Eagles going to have to make sure they pack their lunchbox because it's going to be a long day. But on the flip side too, like the Eagles are the second most run heavy team in the league if you go by 2021 stats underneath the Titans. And they have another game changer in Jalen Hurts where he can tuck the ball. You have an extra blocker, and then he could tote that thing like he's an extra running back. But the one thing that really kind of jumped out to me was his connection with A.J. Brown. Because sometimes you worry about guys switching to a new team and how they're going to perform in the new environment. But it seemed like A.J. Brown was hungry. He was like more of a dog in week 1, to me, it seemed like on tape than he was even in Tennessee. Like that dude looks like he's a man on a mission. Like Jalen Hurts was throwing him contested balls. He was going up, getting them, like running past cornerbacks. Like this dude is going to be something to deal with. And that's something that the Eagles offense did not have last year. And when you add that to the mix of Devontae Smith, who can be a game breaker on the opposite side, Dallas Goedert, that's one of the better tight ends in the league. Like both of these offenses kind of score some points. Both of these defenses have guys on there that are opportunistic. So I feel like this is going to be a matchup where a lot of points are going to be scored. And so when I look at that 50.5, I feel like a lot of these totals came down because of the low scoring games in week 1. I really think this could be a game where we can easily jump over that 50.5. So I would take the over there.
Yeah, Tank, that's actually one of my best bets of the week. We're going to get to that in a second. But right now, boys, it's teaser time. Jared's teasers. Let's get right into it, Jared. Teasers for week 2. Who do you like? Why do you like them? Let's go through the slate.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about them a little bit during the game previews. I will say that the hardest thing that I do every week when I am constructing my teasers is to narrow the list down to 2 or 3. Last week we gave out 3. Didn't matter any way you permutated them together. It was a win because all 3 legs covered. This week I have 2 legs that I really like. We mentioned the Bengals going from 8 to 2. All they have to do is win the game, basically, because not a ton of games land 2 and even less land 1. Then the Browns going from 6 to a pick 'em. Again, there's no spread there. It's basically just win the game. Those are the 2 that I like the most. So that would be my top teaser of the week. I think you could make a case for the Saints and the Panthers. And if you want to do a AFC North teaser with the Bengals and the Browns, for like 1.5 units, which is what I'm doing. And then maybe you want to do a full unit on a NFC South teaser with the Saints and the Panthers. Can't argue there. That's how I would rank them. Bengals, Browns, clear, top tier. Second tier, Saints, Panthers. You get both of those games from 2.5 through those key numbers of 3 and 7 in low total games. They meet all of our criteria. And I think the handicaps make sense too. A little less so with the Panthers. I'd say the Panthers are my least favorite teaser of the week. I'd say Bengals, Browns, 1A, 1B, Saints, a clear second, and then Panthers bringing up the rear.
Panthers bringing up the rear. Bringing up the front, though, is our week 2 best bets. Tank, I'm coming to you first because one of the bets that you have is actually one that I bet last week. It hit, and I want to hear more about why you like Tyreek Hill over receiving yards this week again, too, for week 2.
Basically because I feel like the way that they're using Tyreek Hill in the Miami Dolphins offense is very similar to the way that Deebo Samuel was used in San Francisco, which means that he's just going to get the ball a lot, and he's going to get targeted. In the game against who did we play? New England. In the game against New England this past week, he had 12 targets, I believe 8 catches for 96 yards. And I feel like that's going to be a mainstay that you see with this Dolphins offense, that they're going to make sure that the man that they're paying the most money in the NFL to a wide receiver, that this dude is going to eat. And when you look at it from the flip side about that Baltimore Ravens defense, Joe Flacco, who you're talking about whenever Joe Flacco is quarterback in the team, you don't want any parts to do with it. Yet and still, Corey Davis had 77 yards receiving. Garrett Wilson had 52. Elijah Moore had 49. I think Braxton Berrios had like 30-something yards. And you see one thing with that, Joe Flacco spreading the ball around a lot. Tua's not going to do that. It's going to be Jalen Waddle. It's going to be Tyreek Hill. And then you may have some of the tight ends or the running backs getting the ball here or there. So when you're getting that much of the target share, I feel like the odds are really high for Tyreek Hill to eclipse that 66.5 total receiving yards.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. It was one of my best bets last week. It hit. I like it again this week. And I honestly think his number that the sports books are putting out right now is exceptionally low to what he's going to be producing from week to week this season for the Miami Dolphins. Jared, I want to hear your 49ers pick. You think they're going to bounce back, cover the 9.5, 8.5 point spread, whatever you got it at this week, even though we think it's a lot of points.
Yeah, it's a lot of points until Trey Lance throws a bomb to Brandon Ayuk on the first play of the game, and then all of a sudden it's 7-0, and Geno Smith has to scramble his way. No, I listen. There's a lot of positives to take from what Seattle did on Monday night, and I think we are going to have some moments this year to bet on Geno Smith as an underdog and feel very good about our ticket. I don't think this is one of those weeks. Now, that being said, again, Mother Nature does what she does. The weather report in San Francisco this week doesn't look great. It seems like the rain cloud is just following around San Francisco and this Niners team. We'll see.
He's trying to tell him something.
It looks like again, we're recording this midweek. Who knows? You know how the weather is. But
meteorologists are not paid on accuracy. I will say they are not paid on accuracy.
And I would tell you this, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I can't remember the last time we had rain. So if we do get it, there's definitely something in the water.
If it's a biblical flood like it was.
I love it.
Yeah, no, Tank, sadly, you're not getting more money this week to be a meteorologist. It's only football analysis that we're paying you for. But that being said, if there is another weather event taking place on Sunday in San Fran, maybe temper the expectations because, again, who knows what happens, and we saw what happened in Chicago. But that being said, I really like the matchup here. All things being equal and this game being played in a vacuum, I think the Seahawks defense without Jamal Adams is going to struggle to stop the run. I think the Niners defense is going to do a much better job getting off the ball at the line of scrimmage and causing problems. I mean, goodness gracious. I can't believe how good the Bears' offensive line was against San Francisco. That was the most surprising analytical nugget that I pulled from any week 1 game. An 88% pass block win rate against what arguably is one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. Outside of DK Metcalf, I don't see a ton with the Seattle offense. Their running game was very pedestrian against Denver. And like I said, rookie left tackle Charles Cross looked grossly overmatched on the edge against Bradley Chubb. That's very good for Nick Bosa, very good news for Nick Bosa, who, again, like the rest of this Niners defensive line, was held in check by the Bears offensive line. I think those things flip this week. And I think we get a better Trey Lance, can't do much worse, and a much better San Francisco front against a sell high vibe for Seattle coming off a very emotional win. Oh, by the way, on a short week, they played Monday. The Niners, of course, having that extra day. So I think this kind of fits my buy low, sell high narrative that I love to implement in week 2. And we'll see if the weather cooperates. But weather aside, I do think this is a perfect spot to get in on San Francisco in a bounce back scenario.
It's a lot of points, but we think San Fran can cover. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 bets that I have for this week so far. Obviously, I'm going to probably put in more heading into Sunday. But what I have so far, Vikings, Eagles over 51.5, laying 5 cents for it. I do not think there's going to be a shortage of points in this game. Both offenses are phenomenal this year. Both defenses ranked outside the top 15 NFL teams in DVOA last year. Philly totals have hit the over in each of their last 5 home games. Minnie has gone 9-2 to the over in their last 11 road games. And let me just say, Hurts, Cousins, Jefferson, Brown, Delvin Cook, Miles Sanders. Enough said. 51.5 points. Seems like it's going to hit pretty easily. Falcons, Rams, over 45.5, laying 12 cents for it. The Rams averaged 27 points per game in 2021, 6th in the NFL. And the Falcons defense isn't necessarily the best, but they did play pretty well against the Saints. They gave up 20 points, though, to them in the second half. And ATL had 6 scoring drives in week 1. They're only going to need like 2 or 3 for this over to hit. And the total has gone over in each of the last 7 games that these guys have played between each other. I think it could be a high-scoring game. Last but not least, Patrick Mahomes, over a half interception. So yes, interception, laying 2 cents for it. This game is going to be way more of a shootout than what he saw against the Cardinals last week. He was not challenged at all by the Cardinals secondary, and the Chargers are a completely different story. They had 6 sacks against the Raiders last week. They forced Derek Carr into 3 interceptions, and they're going to challenge Mahomes a lot more in the pocket. They're going to try to put the pressure on him, make him feel uncomfortable. And I know he runs the ball. I know he's extremely mobile, but there's no way he's going to have as perfect of a week as he had last week. He threw 13 interceptions last year during the regular season. Those interceptions were thrown against teams like the Chargers. So I feel like Patrick Mahomes is going to not be as perfect. I still think the Chiefs are probably going to win this game. I'm rooting for the Chargers to win just because I'm a big Justin Herbert fan, but I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have at least 1 interception in this game. And one more thing to note, I said Najee Harris is actually out this week. He said this week that he's actually good enough to play. So good for him, good for them. I'm excited for the Steelers this week. So Pickswise Playbook, guys. We got a sponsor presented by Superbook Sports. Download the Superbook app or visit superbook.com. Right now, they're going to match your first bet up to $1,000. And Tank, Jared, we are rooting for safeties, okay? If you place a $100 pregame bet on any spread or total of Superbook and there's a safety scored in any game on Sunday, you get a $50 bonus. So visit superbook.com for terms and conditions and to sign up for the #1 voted sportsbook in Vegas. It's now available at the palm of your hand, Superbook Sports. Make sure to check them out. One more game to talk about, boys. We have made it to the end of the show. Let's take an in-depth look at Thursday night football. The Chargers taking on the Chiefs. Speaking of that Patrick Mahomes interception that I'm talking about, let's start it out with these AFC West divisional games. Jared, this question's for you. How important are these AFC West divisional games? The Chiefs right now laying 4.5 points.
They're everything. The divisional games, especially in this division, are paramount. I was so impressed with what I saw from Kansas City last week. And again, when you talk about this Chiefs team, they've already raised the bar so high in our eyes that for them to exceed it, this is very difficult. I think they did. I think they're deeper than they've been in previous years where it was Tyreek Hill or bust. I think Patrick Mahomes has a lot more at his disposal than he had in prior seasons. And I think that is only going to make that offense more dangerous. Yes, the individual talent with Tyreek Hill might be a little lower when you grade it out against the rest of the wide receivers now on the roster. But Patty Ice found 10 different receivers, or running backs, tight ends, whatever, on Sunday. He is spreading the wealth now because he doesn't have to focus in on getting the ball to Tyreek Hill. The Chiefs offense had the most pre-snap motion of any team in the league on Sunday, despite the fact that you really don't need to do a whole lot of misdirection when you've got Patrick Mahomes and an incredible wide receiver group in the backfield. So it's still, Andy Reid continues to raise the bar. And, oh, by the way, the rookies are contributing. Tough news on Trent McDuffie, who I think is either out for the year or a significant period of time because he wasn't even targeted in that game against Arizona. But the other rookie, defensive end George Karlaftis, got a ton of pressure, and he was a major factor. So you have rookies on defense contributing. You have a better, deeper, maybe not better, but deeper wide receiver group. And you have Patrick Mahomes in year 6 trying to raise the bar, trying to show that what he did in the earlier stages of his career is not a fluke. So really hard to find value in this game because it's such a tight divisional game on a short week. We'll see how the bodies respond. Tank can speak to this better. Week 1, hard enough to recover from as it is. Now it's week 1, short week in week 2 on a Thursday night. Very difficult. But, man, Patty Mahomes is something special, and that's going to be the guy that, as good as Justin Herbert is, that's the quarterback I would look to in this game to have a better performance.
Yeah, speaking of Patty Ice, Tank, as someone who played secondary in this league, how do you prepare for a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes?
The night before the game, you drop down on both knees and you pray. That's pretty much all you can do. I mean, the way I describe these two quarterbacks is that Patrick Mahomes, to me, he's the third splash brother behind Steph Curry and Klay Thompson because the things that he can do on the football field are just unbelievable. I just think about that one game he had against the Raiders a few years back where in the fourth quarter he just exploded. And it reminds you of Steph Curry when he gets hot behind the arc and it's like no matter what he does, it's just going to end up scoring points. And that's how Patrick Mahomes can get hot. And then on the flip side, you have Justin Herbert, who I like to call touchdown Jesus. I mean, the dude is just unbelievable. He's beautiful to look at, whether you're looking at the balls that he's throwing or the hair flowing from underneath his helmet. The one thing that I'm sad about is that he actually doesn't have his favorite target, Keenan Allen, because I would like for these two teams to match up at full strength, and not having Keenan Allen is going to hurt. But, man, you still have Austin Eckler. If Mike Williams can kind of step up on the outside. They've been raving about Joshua Palmer. Like, if Josh Palmer can go ahead and do what he does, filling in with Keenan Allen. And you have Guyton, who has been able to beat a lot of teams over the top. Joe Everett has been a nice addition to that offense, and he scored a touchdown last week. Run the ball to try to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. But, I mean, when you look at both of these offenses, there's going to be some fireworks. This is one of those games that when you see the schedule, you look forward to it, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to disappoint tomorrow night.
Yeah, guys in the Chargers secondary dropping down to their knees before probably right now because
I do that after I make a bet, Hank. I drop down to my knees and I pray, please, gambling gods, don't screw me over with a field goal miss or a shank or some ridiculous turnover bounce of the fluke ball. I don't know. You know, everyone's lost in some way that they question their religion in some capacity.
And then halfway through the game, you're channeling half-baked once again. Lord, if you're listening, help! It always goes back to that.
Over under 2.5 half-baked references on the show. Cash your over ticket, friends.
Cash the over, baby. That's it for us today for Pickswise Playbook, guys. It's been so much fun. This is chapter 2. We got a lot more chapters coming throughout the entire NFL season. That's Jared Smith. That's Tank Williams. I'm Lauren Jbara. This was Pickswise Playbook presented by Superbook Sports, guys. Best of luck with your bets. Pray to the gambling gods. We'll be back next week.